Management Authority, City of Crescent City, County of Del Norte, State of California. If you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Cowan? Yes. Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yeah, here.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Inscore?
I'm here. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll open up with public comment. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and address for the record and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment this afternoon? Seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment. And before we go into our open session items, I do have a request for some emergency items. Two items. One is an invoice that we didn't have time to process and put on the agenda, but will be due before our following meeting. And the other is an extension for with change order 14, extension of the regarding the processing, because we don't have a processing agreement completed as of yet. We do need a 2/3 majority to add these two emergency items to our agenda.
Move to approve the addition of those two items to the agenda, one being the change order and two, the invoice that will come due prior to our next meeting.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment on this action? Seeing no public comment, then would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Inscore?
Yes, very good. We'll add those items and we will deal with them, I guess, after the director's report. Okay, we have some items on consent. The minutes from September 19th, a claim to North Coast Laboratories for $11,436 and a budget transfer for $25,300. Any public comment on our consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the authority board.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Very good. All right, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Chair Inscore?
Yes. Great. We will move on then to the directors and treasurers reports. Do you, Mr. Ward, do you want to possibly do the financials and then do your state of the agency report, or?
Yes, sir. That sounds like a good idea.
All right, let's go on to treasurer reports for July and August then.
All right. So looking at our regular treasurer's reports and starting with the treasurer controller's reports for July and August, the information from July wasn't available at the time of the last meeting, so it's included in your agenda today. Our current cash balance is $948,745 plus another nearly $200,000 for the last transfer station payment. So in general, our cash is looking good. I'd like to offer this chance to once again appreciate the efforts of Kathy Brewer, who is our administrative assistant. You can see how well our AR aging report is looking. We have lots of zeros in terms of over 90 days and fewer and fewer outstanding accounts. So she's keeping up on that. Very much appreciate that. Claims approved by director. Once again, you can see the largest payment, as per usual, is a payment to Hambro WSG for the good services they provide at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. And we, of course, also have additional expenses for Lawrence & Associates, who is helping to develop the bid documents for the transfer station floor repair. Looking at our overall cash balance, once again, this is still very much good month. This is, I think, the 5th month in a row when we've had the largest revenues at the transfer station that we've seen. So it is going down because the summer is ending, but still we're seeing very, very active customer enthusiasm at our facilities. Our cash flow reflects that, so at this point in time, even making adjustments, we're just in terms of the authority revenues at the transfer station, we're nearly 50,000 ahead of budget at this point in time. So that's pretty good. And there's an additional handout on franchise fees. Franchise fees are still also ahead of budget. So those are the financial reports. I'd be happy to answer any questions in that regard.
All right. You have any questions about financial reports from anyone? Authority? No?
Thanks, Ted.
All right, then I guess we can move on then.
So this is the first presentation, and I have a brief PowerPoint on this one. The blank screen. There we are. Okay. Very good. There we are. Okay. So, State of the Agency Report, keeping in line with the 3 Rs, reduce, reuse, recycle, which of course this agency is promoting. I'd say in summary, the state of the agency is we are reliable, resilient, and regrouping. And so what I mean by that is that we're reliable. Our services are dependable, and customers still count on those services. Our rates are competitive. We still have the lowest rates at authority facilities compared to any facility that's comparable in Curry or Humboldt counties. We have maintained our open hours except for a few hours that we were closed due to smoke and health considerations. Our collection services are reliable. Our household hazardous waste services are reliable. And even during this period of transition where we're challenged to keep our recycling programs going, even when the buyback closed, our recycling services through Recology were reliable. People can still recycle their materials. We're resilient in that we're finally at, once again, full staffing at the authority, so our staff is capable of addressing the challenges we have. We are dealing with the challenges of processing, and we'll be talking about that shortly, but we are continuing to expand our recycling programs, whether that's a mattress recycling, carpet recycling, used motor oil recycling. We still continue to look at ways that we might be able to expand the variety of materials that are recycled. In terms of resilience, we're also tending to some of the outstanding repairs at the landfill, at the transfer station in terms of the floor repair, the erosion repair from the winter storms, and the addressing of the recent fire at the Crescent City landfill, which I'll also talk about later in today's meeting. And we're also regrouping. As you all are aware, we have a challenge with regards to contamination in our recyclables, and we will have to address that in the coming months. We're also regrouping in terms of a buyback. As you all are aware, we don't currently have a buyback center in Del Norte County, and that is a concern to every last one of us, and we are working on that, and I'm hoping within the next 90 days or so we might be looking at something, but we're still working on that. Also, you may have noticed in this Director's State of the Agency report, we have received a notice of violation. That notice of violation is associated with the Pledge of Revenue Agreement that essentially pledges revenues from the Del Norte County Transfer Station to address any problems that might arise at the Crescent City landfill. At the time that our Pledge of Revenue document was adopted, unfortunately that was just about the same time that CalRecycle updated their standard form, and they insist that we need to adopt a new Pledge of Revenue Agreement because the Pledge of Revenue Agreement form that they like has signature lines for CalRecycle officially accepting the Pledge of Revenue. And at this point in time, those signature lines aren't there, and so they want us to go through the additional process of revising the Pledge of Revenue and going through the adoption process again. So that's the nature of that notice of violation.
Can I ask a quick question, Tim,
Yeah.
before we move on? I just noticed there was a long time frame behind that. How come, why? I mean, they were insinuating that you weren't responding, so I'm
Right.
kind of curious why the statements were made and why you weren't responding.
So there was a long period of time in which we had applied for reducing the multiplier, and so there was a series of paperwork, and they took a long time to reply to that. Ultimately, when they replied, their reply was, we need a new Pledge of Revenue adopted. And they included that in their response, saying that our multiplier application was being rejected. It was a thick document. I didn't read the last detail in which they said they expected a response by September 27th. And so then I got this following letter. I immediately called the person and discussed with it, and essentially they were concerned that they didn't have our attention. I assured them they absolutely do have our attention. This is an important issue. But as you may recall, the reason we were looking at it before was motivated by the financing expenses associated with the repair projects we were doing. And once we found out that that wasn't going anywhere, it dropped in priority. When they got the notice of violation to us, it raised in priority immediately. So we are working on this. We'll be working with the Board of Supervisors and our legal counsel to draft a new pledge of revenue agreement and work that through the process to get it
And I
approved.
saw that response, and originally they were giving you 10 days, and I saw your response to them, but I did not see another response back. Are they okay with that time frame?
Verbally, they're okay, yes.
So we don't have anything in writing?
That's correct.
Okay.
Other areas we're regrouping will include the organics process.
I have one question.
Oh, yes, please.
My understanding of the letter was that their refusal to downgrade the multiplier was partially because we weren't talking to them or we were late on. Was that incorrect?
No, that's not incorrect. But as I was explaining, they did ask for additional information, and when they asked for that additional information, I was already aware that reducing the multiplier wasn't going to impact the financing of those other projects, which we were working on actively. So I just dropped it in priority.
Okay.
All right? Okay. We will have additional planning associated with organics processing in coming years. That is not yet a very hot issue like Buyback Center is, but it will be in coming years. And then, of course, we're regrouping in terms of trying to develop a northern transfer station. But, of course, that will follow our completion of the landfill repair projects and the transfer station floor repair. So that's the general summary. In general, the agency is doing pretty well. Our finances are improving. Also associated with this report, you'll see that there's another letter from CalRecycle, essentially emphasizing that we are now in the public comment period. It's a copy of a letter that was sent to Walmart, and they're sending CalRecycle is sending letters to all of the retailers that sell beverages to let them know they can either start paying a fine or they can start providing buyback services. So the grocers are still in the process of making those decisions, but unless I have directions otherwise from the authority board, my intention is that we write letters to each of, in response as part of the public comment, to each of these saying that we really need to have a buyback in the county. And it would, in our staff's opinion, it would not be appropriate for CalRecycle to grant exemptions to all of the grocers in the county because that would leave us without a buyback. And that most of the responsibility should fall upon the grocers who are selling the most beverage containers.
So I saw the letter was just to Walmart, so, but Safeway should also be in there?
They'll be receiving similar letters and will have similar letters for each of the grocers.
CalRecycle.
That's correct.
Okay, so we can continue
So my
to see
intent is
that.
that we send the same response letter back.
Okay.
Essentially, we need to have a buyback center somewhere in the county. We need to have a buyback center somewhere in the county.
So it was my understanding that the markets have already chosen to pay that fine, is that correct?
I do not know that.
In the past?
Many grocers have.
Have in the past. Okay, so is there any way of getting CalRecycle to up that fine to get them to, you know what I mean? Is there any leverage we have? Because if the fine is minimal, most likely they're just going to pay the fine. So how do we work with CalRecycle to get that fine high enough where they're willing to do it?
My understanding is the fine level is $100 per day, which for a large grocer is not necessarily a big expense. For a small liquor store, it's a very large expense. So it depends. I certainly appreciate the suggestion. We'll pursue that with CalRecycle. At this point, I'm informing the board, but my intent is to respond to each of these calls for public comment, to respond saying we need to have a buyback center somewhere in the county, and that we feel that would be inappropriate for CalRecycle to accept as fines and not actually have anybody have the requirement to provide buyback services. Okay?
Okay.
In general, our finances continue to improve. In the most recent year for which we have an audit, our cash balance increased, or, came out of the hole by $167,513, but we retain a net deficit position, which means that on the whole, the authority is in debt because we have the liability associated with the landfill. So we're slowly digging ourselves out of that hole, but that is our financial status. Regarding collections, as you all are aware, Recology's relationship with Julindra ended in 2016, and Julindra closed on the 23rd of September 2017. We're still working to establish another buyback. Regarding summary of other things that happened, Wes White resigned as CEO of Hambro, and David Schlegel is here as interim CEO, and Joel Wallen is back as operations manager at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. We've already talked about the smoke hazards causing some closures. We've talked about storms eroding the landfill. And now there was a fire at the Crescent City landfill, so now I'll go on to the next presentation. See if I can put this down. There we are. Full screen. There we go. Okay. So last Friday, I saw smoke at the landfill, which is near my house, and I went to the gate, and there was already a fire truck there. I understand that the fire was called in about 6:20. These pictures were taken about 6:45. The greatest damage was done to a loader, which was left on the top of the landfill and was next to a dirt pile. It was engulfed in flames at the time that I arrived. So here's a panorama. You can see the loader's on fire in the front there, and the fire continues on the south. Quick response from the fire crews contained the fire to the landfill mound. You can see that there was one down drain that was completely burned. So it just looked like somebody removed it, but what had happened was it burned in place, and as plastic burns in place, it just leaves kind of a divot. So here's the extension of the fire that occurred at the landfill. That area that's in the black line is now all black. There also was damage to 5 of the gas vents, but it's really minor damage. I believe staff should be able to effect those repairs. Fire breaks and fire damaged areas will also need to be reseeded and somewhat regraded. So it wasn't a long slideshow there, sir. Okay.
Do we have a possible cause?
I did talk to Fire Chief Steve Wakefield, and he did say that the cause of the fire was suspicious, but he also said that investigating these things is difficult, and he didn't anticipate any further information on it.
Okay.
Let's see. We are now fully staffed. Towards the beginning of the year, we did have transitions in both the administrative assistant and the facilities and programs coordinator position, but largely through open competitive hiring processes, but hiring folks who are already working for us and moving them up. Catherine Brewer is now our administrative assistant. Haley Smith is now our account clerk. Kira Seymour is now both our facilities and programs coordinator and serves as the authority board clerk. And we are fully staffed. We've also hired a new contractor, Digital Needs Services, to help us with computer maintenance and repair, and that contractor is working out very well. And we've had surprise cash counts, once again affirming that our records accurately represent our holdings to the penny. And as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Authority Board, this board also approved the towing agreement with Northcrest Auto Center to provide towing services through August 2020. Regarding facilities management, we did install 2 new wells at the Crescent City landfill, and we're using those for monitoring. We have kept up to our regulatory compliance requirements. We are also continuing to experience savings by having a no exposure certification at the Del Norte County Transfer Station for stormwater monitoring. Things like that continue to pay off. During our tour yesterday, when we were at the processing center for Humboldt and then went to the Hawthorne Street transfer station. Brent Whitener, their operations manager, went on for some time about all the problems they're having with stormwater management and all the challenges they have complying with their stormwater commitments. And so that no exposure certification what seemed all the more valuable to me that day, because it is valuable. Regarding advocacy, we've written letters regarding SB 168 and supporting SB 102, and unfortunately, neither of those bills passed. Regarding outreach and education, we now have a Facebook page, thanks to Kira, and of course, our information is available regularly through our website. We were not able to participate with the Youth and Family Fair this past year due to staffing shortfalls at the time, though we did support the Del Norte County Fair as we usually have, and we did have Green Ribbon Awards. In the upcoming year, we're obviously looking to complete the processing agreement. We're looking to complete the erosion and damage repairs at the landfill and to receive reimbursement, hopefully through the Office of Emergency Services. We're looking to complete the repairs at the Del Norte County Transfer Station for the floor and the ramp. We are looking to hopefully establish a new buyback center in the coming year at some location. We will work with Lawrence and Associates and the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board staff in updating our monitoring and reporting program for the Crescent City landfill, but in all honesty, at this point, I would expect that to be both a relatively low priority and probably not something that will happen very quickly. I was just informed that our Regional Water Quality Control Board person looking over our shoulders unfortunately lost her house during the Santa Rosa fires, and so she'll be in a sort of regrouping mode for herself in the next few months. We are increasing the convenience of mattress recycling under programs supported by the Mattress Recycling Council and having 3 mattress collection events per year. And of course, we're responding to CalRecycle requests for documentations of efforts to promote mandatory commercial recycling and the development of organics processing facilities. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the authority? Anybody? Okay. I will just, and I've mentioned this already, and we've already had a couple of questions regarding the violation letter. I would just reiterate my personal belief that regardless of challenges, timing, staffing, regulatory things need to stay as a priority, especially given the complexity of the idea of making application to reduce that multiplier. That I think it's an opportunity for us to step back and just realize there are certain things that we have to keep at the top that may seem like they are just time consuming, but that we don't want to end up in a spot where somebody who has authority over us, that they can make our life more difficult. So I just encouragement to make sure that we are curing and correcting and avoiding those things in the future.
Yes, sir.
Everything else, I appreciate the report, and good, you've had a good year, so.
I do have one question. Doesn't the multiplier have something to do with the liability number?
It does.
As well.
That's
So that
really what it affects.
Serve to drop that?
It affects the liability as summarized in our annual external audit.
Okay.
So it does affect that, as I mentioned, we're sort of digging ourselves out of the hole. It affects the depth of that hole.
Okay.
But realistically, it is a calculated liability.
That's why it's important.
Right. That's right.
And it becomes a perception thing.
Right.
For those who choose to cast stones or to make comments about the authority as a whole, you know, and again, it's just a matter of making sure we're crossing every T and dotting every I so that the naysayers don't have anything to talk about. Anyway, all right, anything else for that? Then let's go ahead and add as 2.6 this financial matter, the claim regarding the hazardous waste for 28,000, is that it?
Yes.
956.45. Again, I would trust that staff will look at this, and if we authorize this, that if you come across something and find that there is something inaccurate, you will not pay it?
You took the words right out of my mouth, sir.
Well-
That's exactly what I was going to say, because we haven't had a chance to review this invoice, and of course, we want to do it, and it is a complicated invoice. And so what we
Say
suggest
so.
is that to approve payment of up to this amount, so that when we go through the final review, we're making sure that that is totally right before we actually pay it.
Okay.
Motion to approve, Chair.
All right, I have a motion to approve,
I'll
What's-
second that.
2.6.
item 2.6. Any public comment? Any questions? All right, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Enscore?
Yes, very good. We'll move on to item 3, landfill post-closure. Do you have anything to update regarding the storm-related repairs?
Mostly, it was the slideshow to emphasize that there is additional damage to the landfill, and because the storms are coming soon, chances are we will be working with Hemmingson Construction to effect a change order so that they can help us get those repairs done so that we don't have storm damage associated with the upcoming storms because we don't have any drainage structures in place. So that really is a top priority. I already discussed this with Rick Lockstead of the county, and we're working on it. We will try to do this as expeditiously as possible, and I believe that may be the fastest way, but I will confer with legal counsel before we do that.
Okay. So you'll have an update for us at our next meeting, which is only a couple weeks away.
That's correct.
Okay, any questions? All right, we're going to go on to collections franchise. We're going to add 4.2, which is collections change order 14, and we're going to handle 4.2, and then we will talk about 4.1, the processing
Okay.
agreement. So we have a change order in front of us. I'm assuming I didn't have a chance to read it, that we're extending again another 30 days?
That's correct, sir. It's identical to change order 13, except it's extending it for 30 days instead of 60 days.
What are you-
The reason for the extension is we just need a few more days to come to final negotiations on the processing agreement.
Okay, good. All right, any public comment on change order 14? Seeing none, bring it back to the authority for action.
I'll make a motion that we approve collections change order number 14.
All right, have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion, a second, please pull the vote.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Enscore?
Yes, all right, now we'll go to 4.1, the processing agreement itself. Are we going to hammer this out in here, or are you guys going to keep working on it and bring it back to us? on
We're
the
very
7th?
close. We're very close, but we always want to keep our legal counsels in the loop, so everything takes time, and every time we change a few words, then we have to go through our process.
All right.
That a fair assessment?
I'm not going to get into that, so
Basically just blame legal.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
yeah,
That's okay.
Martha
Bus.
doesn't care.
No, Martha is not the delay.
Yeah, you get paid either way, right? No matter what
I
anybody
didn't see
says.
the fingers getting pointed the other.
Can I ask a question? I mean, do you think it will be done in 30 days? Honestly, I mean, all I see is extensions on all kinds of things from this board. Do you want to share it with the board so we can weigh in, or you guys want to keep that to yourself? Well, I'm just kind of curious what's holding it up and
Right.
what are the issues and, oh, maybe you guys don't want to. It's like looking at me like I asked the question. I
Go
mean,
ahead.
I just want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a new thing that we're still working through. Two things, I guess, that we're kind of looking at. One is we're trying to set parameters for the contamination levels. So what happens is since we're drafting this notification, it originally started out as that 30% was acceptable, and that's not really acceptable in anywhere. So we're holding tough at the 10% standard for contamination levels, because that's just industry standard. What we're trying to figure out now, and we're trying to get the verbiage correct, is the notification process to the authority. So when a load comes in that is, you know, contaminated like it is currently, but we're going to be working on a process of cleaning this up. So it's going to be a monitoring process, but we need to provide notification to the authority that, hey, this load had this percentage, this is what we found, what can we do about it? We're going to plan to work together, come up with a solution to try to get that to reduce, and then retest it again.
Well, and that's really great, but for 10 months, I've been sitting on this board, and we've been talking about the same thing, and nothing has happened. We're still at 25%. I know at one point we were at 28 or 30, but we're still high.
Correct.
So when I sat down with Ted last week going through this, it was my understanding we were looking at a gradual. So it sounds like we proposed a gradual, and you don't want to have a gradual?
Well, we can't propose it, because really where we're looking at is this. The way it's currently set up is the Samoa processing facility is technically set up for Humboldt. So they are going to be setting up an agreement with Humboldt. So right now, currently, they're in the contract negotiations with the processing agreement as well, reevaluating this. So they're going to be setting a standard at 10%. So we can't just have Del Norte doing 30 and everybody else can do 10. So that's the problem with the industry standard, that once that standard is set, we have to maintain it. What we're willing to do is we're trying to work with the communities to say, hey, this is where we need to be, but we're not right now super enforcing the fact of we're trying to buy some more time to really get this thing proactive, to get everybody committed, to get this contamination reduction in place, if that makes sense.
What have we been doing for 6 months?
Nothing, but
We have been, we've had town halls. there's
we
been
have,
stuff,
but-
nothing's changing. What are we going to do to change it?
Well, we have
I can't imagine
the-
in 30 days, we can come to you and say, oh, we're good, we'll do
No.
10%.
No, we
Okay.
started out with the ad hoc, and we had a bunch of proposals and a bunch of things that
And
were
nothing
going
got
back and
passed by
forth,
this
and there was
board.
nothing that came about from that.
Nope.
So here we are, here we are.
It doesn't stop just in the community can, it's also occurring as is blue recycling can.
Yeah.
Well, Exactly.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
a multiple factor.
Issue, and I agree, it's not gonna get solved in 30 days.
Yeah,
No.
and that's my concern.
No, it's not going to, and we know that. We're aware of that. Yeah.
But the reality is that we're talking two different things here. You're trying to represent Recology as the new processor, while at the same time representing Recology here, who's a part of this collection franchise, which is a difficult spot, because if we took Recology out of the equation and it was any other processor, they would be putting the same restrictions of 10% on us. So the solution really is not about the processing agreement. The solution is changing the behavior in our community.
Correct.
It's collections that's the problem. It's not processing that's the problem. So
That is
we've
correct.
got to we've got to put in place a processing agreement that is consistent with industry standards. We're not going to ever get a processing agreement that addresses the lack of compliance in our community. That's an enforcement issue, that's a collection issue that we're going to have to continue to work on. But we have to get a processor in place, and it wouldn't, again, I think it's very unfair for you to try to play both roles here.
It's tough.
But it's what you're stuck doing right now, because Recology is doing both. But we've got to have a processing agreement in place. Industry standard, doesn't matter. We're not going to get anybody else to do it for that. We've got to get the agreement in place, and then we've got to go back to the ground zero, so to speak, and start talking about collections and getting it into compliance.
That's correct, because like you said, there's going to be with this processing facility, there could be an upwards of 15 different contracts through different counties. And with that being said, Del Norte's contract with the processor cannot be any different than the others.
Fine.
And I agree. I guess I'm talking more to this board. I mean, we give them 30 days, we have to be down to 10. What are we willing to do to make sure that happens? Because I'll tell you, sitting here for 10 months, we haven't done anything. And we need to take drastic measures if we have a 30-day window.
We're trying not to give you a 30-day window. What we're saying is that we're trying to get the verbiage correct in this that allows a clarification process. So what Mr. Ward and I are discussing right now is how do we convey, right now, we already know there's contamination, period, and that's not going to change in 30 days. What we're trying to say is, though, we're trying to buy some time here to try to get this re-engaged with the board and the community to say, hey, it's now or never, we've got to do something. And with that being said, once we start this process, now we have a communication standard that says, here's what we're finding, this is what our percentage is, and then we're going to pull another random load out after a few weeks after we've made hopefully some adjustments and changes to the collections or whatever that's going to be, and we're going to continue to communicate as we work through this together. And that's what we're trying to figure out. We have kind of the right, we're in the right area, we just need to figure out the legal verbiage, that's the issue.
And to address Commissioner Cowan's comments, in the December meeting, we will be discussing strategies to reduce contamination or address.
I guess it really,
I understand that we have one meeting in November,
authority to be.
November 7th.
That's the
that's
exact question.
the question you're asking is how heavy do you want this authority hand to be?
Well, not just that, but so we choose not to be heavy-handed, and we get into a contract with them, and we get down to 20%. What happens to the authority? What responsibilities then come back to us?
Right.
Are we going to be fined? Are we no longer going to have a processing plant because we made an agreement that we can't keep? That's what I want to know.
This kind of talk kind of bothers me because this is supposed to be something like a trash service. We're a government organization. Why are we forcing our citizens into something? We're elected officials here.
Because
You know.
the government requires us to recycle. It's our duty to do what
Yeah,
the
in
government's
in my
asking.
opinion, I think
The
this.
state of
Recycle.
California requires us to recycle, and if we
it's-
don't, we get fined. So maybe we need to.
I understand we get fined, but I think that we as a board need to be careful with what we do as far as a service is concerned.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is we can roll the dice with Cal Recycle. Calories, that's why, while I still feel compelled to say we need to take notice when we don't want anybody giving us a violation letter. The reality is Cal Recycle is spinning right now. They don't know what they're going to do. If we decided just send it all to White City right now, the likelihood of Cal Recycle coming down heavy on us right now, it's there, but we are small potatoes compared to what they're dealing with in the state of California. So while, again, how heavy-handed do we want to be? Do we want to start mandating that this is the options you have, because we know what will change by statistical research, what will change the percentage of contamination, make everybody have a single-size big can. Do we want to do that? Nobody wants to force anybody to do anything, but we also have to realize, and we should get over this idea that everybody gets all these options and choices. For years, you went and bought your own dang can, you lined it with paper, and somebody came by and picked it up and threw it in a truck. We don't live in those days anymore, but we also have to realize that maybe we don't need to live in the days where everybody gets 6 or 7 options. I mean, we've become so sensitive to the fact that everybody ought to have all these multiple options in the world that we live in, and the world is changing. And the world of being so consumer-minded that everybody can have everything that they want, living in a remote community like we have, that's not going to be possible anymore. And at some point in time, we'll have to draw the line. And it's going to be very unpopular, and we're going to get hammered for it when we draw a line.
And Jason, if you don't, I get what you're saying. We don't have to recycle. You're right, we can take all the trash off. But we're talking about a contract with somebody to recycle with. So we're addressing a contract issue, which is to send our recycling. And that's my concern. I don't want to be in breach of contract. If we agree on a contract, we got to make sure we can do it, or taking steps to correct it. if we choose not to do that contract, then let's not do the contract. Let's just send everything to White City. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, and roll
No,
the
that's
dice.
not what I'm saying. Maybe
No, no,
we
no,
need
I
to
know
do
you're
some
saying, but
more
what-
things here. I don't know, get the community involved somehow, makes,
Agreed.
I don't know,
For 9 months,
open
we've
some
been
kind of a
doing that.
sorting facility. I don't know.
There's
I'm not
multiple
sure what we
options
would
that
need
were
to do.
discussed. I mean, there is a lot of options, but ultimately, the decision is not Recology's.
I'm not
It's
saying
this
that
board's decision on the direction you guys
Yeah.
want to take. What I'm here to do is to provide multiple different options that have worked in other communities. You can do your own research. We can give you some of our experiences, but ultimately, it is not my decision to make. It is ultimately you five to decide how you want to go down this road.
But for months, regardless of that, and you're right, but for months, it has been your burden and Recology's burden financially to bear for the sorting and the determining what's going, what's not going.
Yeah, it's-
That cost has been on Recology.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's an agreement that we have. But I also want to look at this as well, that, in the original portion of it, a lot of the agreements that the RFPs that go out, there's that standard that's been set, and we've been working with it. And we want to continue to work with it. We're not here to throw up a wall and says, hey, if you don't meet this, we're going to shut everything off. That's not the case. We're here to support and work with the board and the community to find a solution to move forward. That's the bottom line. And I don't think we're trying to, in this contract, put down an iron fist that's saying if you don't do it within 35 days, we're done. I think this is a work in progress, but I think it needs to be re-engaged. It's kind of got to the bottom of the pile, and I think it just needs to be readdressed. That's what we're here to do.
I had a question, then I wanted to have a comment, but as far as in Humboldt County, with Humboldt Recology, what is the contamination rate?
They are currently between 6 and 8%.
Oh, they're below 10.
Yes, sir.
So why are we so much different?
There's so many factors.
Uh-huh.
That didn't happen. They didn't get to that rate overnight. This is something they've been working on for many, many years.
The reason I'm asking is I used to live in Humboldt County before I came here.
Right.
And there's so many similarities between Humboldt and here. So
There's-
that's why
there's a lot.
is something that's so different, it's hard to understand why this would be so much different, because other things are quite similar.
They're very similar, same challenges in just about every community, and so as these challenges arise, that's where policies and procedures are adjusted. Really, as far as I've been here, I don't have a whole lot of history in front of that, other than, when we have had challenges, it's been difficult to get them to move.
So what policies and/or procedures do they have that might help us?
Well, currently, there's some contract issues. We have what we agreed on, 6, 7 years ago in the original contract. As things adjust or change in the community, and we find that these are problem areas, we really don't have the ability to change them at this time. It's something that we need to work through. It needs to be readdressed.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? How does it affect the community? How does it affect a whole bunch of things? There's so many different factors involved in it. It's almost easier to kind of break out sections and work through those sections to find out what's best.
So I'm just saying what's happening in Humboldt compared to here, as far as what Recology is doing that might be different than what we have in place.
Well-
And maybe we could learn from that and help modify our process.
Correct, and you know who, that's not an issue to be able to sit down with them and go over what they've done different, but they've been working on this process, they've made can changes, they've got a mandatory service, they've removed community recycling bins, that, there's a whole bunch of different things that they've done that I don't think this board has been ready to either accept or make the change to, and that's acceptable as well. But in order to make those contamination rates change, something else, I mean, we have to, decisions have to be made that they're not always the easiest ones to swallow for everybody.
I know we were talking yesterday down in Eureka about the fact that you have a little different process now where you can address the repeat violators.
Correct.
Yeah. So in other words, I mean, that's one policy change that hopefully will help, reduce the contamination rate. But yeah, if we can do more things like that and really help address where the problem is, because bottom line, I don't want to penalize the people who are doing things right.
That is correct.
So we just have to focus on where the problem is and try to really resolve that as best as we can.
Correct.
And then at the same time, somehow we have to get things done from here. So I think bottom line is we have to start with where we're at and work down rather than just saying, okay, 10%, and then all of a sudden saying we have a serious problem, and then we say there's no solution, and then we resort to something extreme. Somehow, I think we just have to work our way down as quick as possible to bring it down from where it's at down to the 10%.
And we're definitely willing to pitch in to help do that.
Okay, good, thank you.
Again, we're talking two things here. We need to get the processing agreement done. It needs to be in a consistent language with all the other processing agreements that are being done. We should not be trying to write language into the processing agreement that addresses the non-compliance up here. That, if we're going to make changes in any kind of agreement to deal with those things, that's part of the collections agreement that we may have to open up and discuss, because ultimately, you're responsible for picking all this stuff up, and you're bearing the burden of having to sort it because of the contamination level. The processing agreement, as far as I'm concerned, is the processing agreement.
That's kind of where we're hung up, though, too, is because we are trying to adapt a processing agreement that's standard to fit Del Norte, and that's where the challenge has been.
See, and I wasn't part of that, and I apologize, but I don't think that that's not the place that needs to be addressing those things. They need to be addressed in the collections agreement, because that's where the problem is.
That
The
is
problem is
correct.
not processing.
Correct.
We have a processor ready, willing, and able to take our stuff. If we can't get our stuff together, then that has to do with collections and behavior in our community, not processing. We need to get the processing agreement in place, consistent with the other contracts, and then we've got to go back to work, just as has been said across the board here, and get our community on board with dealing with compliance. Two separate issues. Let's get one in place that should be easy. It's something that legal people do. Get over it, get it done, put it in place, and then let's get back to work on what really needs to be fixed,
That is correct.
and that's collections.
So you'll have that on our November agenda for approval.
Well,
Why December?
The November meeting is November 7th, and there's not very much on that meeting because it's happening very quickly.
And as Commissioner Cowan emphasized, we've been working on this for how long?
I appreciate that, but a lot of the details you can't narrow down until you know who the processor is. So we didn't really have the processor and the processing plant until the last few months. So on the collection issues, certainly we've been discussing for that period of time, but we haven't had the focused concentration on the processor. Regarding the November issue, I will be on vacation. It's a vacation that was approved by the board. There's only so much that I can do on vacation while working.
Well, I believe Chair is right in this case, and Commissioner Cowan's right in this case. We need to have a contract, and we'll deal with the other issues in our agreement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, Jeremy.
well, we'll continue to, unless we can try to get something done by the end of this week, we can try.
Yeah.
We'll do what we can.
But
Okay?
Thank you.
Glad to see you smiling, Jeremy.
Okay. Let's go to 5, the bid. for the
This is a
transfer
status report, just letting you know that we do have the bid on the streets. We are soliciting bids. The bid due date will come up before the December meeting, and we hope to have bids for your review and approval at that meeting.
All right. General matters, regarding the delinquent accounts issue, the whole 3 times, you want to
Yeah,
address that?
Kathy, you want to come up? So in general, this was a policy that Kathy and I had talked about, but essentially as we were settling up the fiscal year for the last year, there was one account that had been placed on hold 3 times, and it begged the question about how many times do we need to place an account on hold before we feel like we've had enough communication and enough effort. Because of course we do take checks and credit and debit cards, and so we have lots of different payment options, but we're really not a bank for taking loans out, and we're not a credit agency. So our recommendation is that we adopt this policy that if your account has been placed on hold 3 times, that your account is now closed, and if you would like to apply for another account, you can appeal that to the authority board.
Catherine?
Any questions?
Fine to me.
Make that motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve this new 3 strikes in your closed policy. Have any public comment? Sorry. Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the board for action. Please poll the vote. Mr. Greeno.
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Inscore?
Yes, very good. All right, the RFP for the litter cleanup services, 6.2.
Yes, this is a request for proposal for essentially a laborer contract that can help us assess the labor associated with cleaning up specific properties. Hopefully, much of this activity will be reimbursable under a U.S. Forest Service grant, but we do have occasional cleanups that occur outside Forest Service properties where we'd just like to have somebody that we could contract to safely clean up an area. So this is something that is still in a draft format. We have a few additions we'd like to make, and we'd like to consult with our colleagues at the county and our legal counsel before final release. So staff are recommending approval to release this request for proposals pending final review by staff and legal counsel.
There's some highlighted things in here, there's not dollars associated with that. Do you have an anticipation of what those numbers are going to be?
In terms of labor costs, we have a little over $8,000 from the Forest Service grant. We anticipate that the total contract amount is probably going to be quite a bit more than that, probably well over $10,000, but those are some of the final details we'll be working on. So it's not a very large contract, is the short of it.
Okay. Well, it'll be coming back to us before we get it approved anyway, so that's fine.
Yes, we will not enter into any agreements without bringing it back to the board for discussion.
Do you anticipate that we will have any ideas on the certainty or of the Forest Service grant before we make a decision on somebody's proposal?
I am not clear on the question, sir.
So if you said we think that the forest grant may be based on historical $8,000, let's say this comes back in at 14.
Right.
So there's a $6,000 difference. If we don't get the grant.
We already have the grant.
Oh, you have the grant.
And
already in place.
what we're
I didn't understand.
looking at currently, we haven't finished the evaluation sheet, but we're actually looking at using an estimate of the number of hours.
Okay.
And then using the hourly rate as part of the evaluation
All right,
process.
sorry about that. I misunderstood. Okay. Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay. Do I have a motion, then we release the RFP for forest and river cleanup?
So moved.
I got a motion
Second.
and a second. Mr. Greeno, Mr. Howard. Would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Cowan?
Yes.
Commissioner Naffa?
Yes.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Inscore?
Yes, very good. All right, so we're at 6.3.
At the last meeting, the board asked that we shift the meeting to November 7th to avoid the 2 days before Thanksgiving meeting, and so this would be our meeting for November.
So you mentioned a while ago that, and I know we talked a little bit about it from agenda review. What other things do you anticipate other than a meeting to review your evaluation? Do you anticipate being on the November 7th meeting? The likelihood of the processing agreement not being there in 2 weeks, then what else will be there?
I anticipate that the processing agreement will be there.
By November 7th?
Yes.
Oh,
We're
so you
we're
said-
really very close, and I think we'll be able to get there.
Okay.
And so that and minutes and the finalizing the director's evaluation.
Would it be more beneficial if we moved to the 14th rather than the 7th, just to make sure that it would be on the agenda?
Little hard to predict. I don't know that the meeting room's available on the 14th, so it's a little hard to make that choice on the fly unless we contact the clerk now and go upstairs and see if it's available on the 14th. That's potentially possible. Would the 14th work for the board members? Commissioners? 14th, all okay?
The 14th actually
Yeah.
would be better for me than the 7th.
Kira, can you contact the...
Oh, that's the reason. That's the
Hopefully, we'll have
reason.
already finished the negotiations before we get to the agenda. Okay.
Well,
And I don't have my schedule in front of me, so I
I'd be
can't.
more than happy to go 3 or move up the time too. But I don't know how it affects everybody's schedules.
3 o'clock would be fine for me.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Contact Kylie upstairs and see if this meeting room is available starting 3 o'clock on November 14th.
okay.
Three o'clock.
3 o'clock. Okay. That,
Yes.
yes.
I was just going to comment about, I mean, personally, I'm available earlier, and I know Chris said he would be, just in case we wanted to start it as early as, let's say, 2:30, since Chris has to be out of here for 4 o'clock.
That would be fine.
We only have that one item on
The processing agreement and then a closed
Yes,
session
review.
review of TED. 2:30? Okay. Yeah, yeah, if it's free at 3, it'll be free. Okay. All right, very good. So on item 6.3, we are, the proposal is to schedule special meeting time for November 14th at 2:30 here in the Flynn Center Council Chambers, Board Chambers. I'm hearing consensus from everyone that meeting meets with staff?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, then please let it reflect that we will schedule a special meeting for November 14th at 2:30 here, and that the regular scheduled meeting for November 21st will be canceled. All right. Anything on the work plan that you want to talk about today, Mr. Ward?
Just that I did update the work plan to reflect all of the things that we discussed in the State of the Agency report, so you may notice that the pledge of revenue, for instance, is at the top of the list on the Crescent City landfill.
All right.
Similar changes, but this is a living document, so
Yeah.
if we discuss something as a priority, then it gets into the document.
And I had one comment. On page 6, if it would be the item right before section 4, and it does say, "and processors
Oh,
like
right.
Julindra."
Good point.
So, yeah, so somehow to word it where processors like the former Julindra, something like that, so.
Thank you for that correction.
Okay. All right, we have come to the end of our agenda. We are going to go into closed session. We do not anticipate that there will be anything to report, any action out of closed session. You're welcome to stay if you want to wave us goodbye when we come back, but we shouldn't be long. But that
Do I
will
wait after
close
the-
our regular session. All right, let's go, let's get in there and get out.
Okay.